Right. Ladies and gentlemen, we're recording. Nat, over to you. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I am going to do a brief introduction to Content Hub. It's very lightweight, just to kind of introduce us, and over time we can kind of come back to certain topics and look at them in a little bit more detail. This is non-technical. I'll allow Peter to pick that mantle up as and when he's ready. So let's get into it then. So I'm going to run through some of the slides we discussed as part of the SUGMIA presentation. So if you've seen that, you might recognise some of these. So we've all heard the term the content crisis being batted around quite a lot recently. But in reality, when we boil this down, what does it really mean? Kind of in my mind, it's essentially marketing buzzwords for classic business silos and challenges when organising materials and applied to the content world in this context. But the reality is the necessity and demand for content is greater than ever before. And thus the challenge is the same, but somewhat on steroids, as content is created and stored in a myriad of locations and formats and edited by various parties. And this is really where content crisis kind of comes into play. So let's take a look at this briefly with regards to Content Hub. So we have content repositories, and in this example, we've got a CMS or a DAM, and essentially what we're trying to do is deliver that content to multiple channels whilst maintaining some level of consistency and governance. And that's kind of key, like consistency and governance around content. And by applying a delivery layer, it's possible to provide scalable graphical endpoint for various applications to pull and consume content from. And in this case, or in Sitecore's case, that software is Sitecore's Experience Edge. And a SaaS, which is a SaaS-based delivery layer for content. So narrowing this down into Content Hub itself, let's take a quick look at what that is. So that basically enables your content to be headless. You can deliver content at speed, and it's highly scalable because of those reasons. So Content Hub is essentially a series of tools, and I'll come on to that in a minute, that enables us to aggregate the various different sets of content, different points of content, consume that in a single source of truth, and apply various different tools to kind of plan content strategies, collaborate, manage and create content, and ultimately publish it in a consistent way. So essentially we're enabling the efficiency and ensuring consistency of content across multiple channels, which means that the user is essentially receiving a consistent experience across your brand and your multiple touch points. So Content Hub itself, essentially it started off as Sitecore bought a company called Style Labs several years ago now, and as since then it's kind of evolved into what is currently a suite of products, which is 5 products at the moment. And of course there's they've narrowed it down into multiple acronyms just to make life more confusing. But essentially, we can start off with the DAM, so Digital Asset Management, which is essentially does what it says on the tin. It's the repository for your images, PDFs, videos, all different content types. You can categorize content, search content, and so on. And I'll kind of come on to some of that a little bit later. You've then got the CMP, which is Content Marketing Platform. And that basically enables you to plan and ideate your content strategies and how you are going to disseminate that across multiple channels, the type of content that you need. You can assign content requirements to different users. Marketing resource management, which is where it all comes together. So that's the project management side of things. You can kind of assign budgets and timelines and review content performance in there as well. In the release of version 3.4, PCM and web to print were introduced. PCM is the product content management, And again, kind of does what it says on the tin. It's essentially enables you to kind of centralize content and data specifically to products. And you can start to associate products with content and campaigns. So let's assume you're using Instagram, for example, to promote particular products. You can surface the most up-to-date product data by way of that as well. And then with the and then there's web to print, which is kind of replaces what was PXM, if anybody remembers that. So essentially you can utilize templates or create custom templates and pull in lots of that content, so images, product data and so on, to create printable content items. And again, you can kind of govern the brand guidelines around that. So by way of these 5 products in the suite, you've got a repository, you've got your planning tools, and you've got the ability to kind of maintain governance, management rights, and so on and so forth. And I'll kind of come on to that in a minute. The latest version of Sitecore Content Hub is version 4.0, and that was released in February this year, and some of the benefits of that are that essentially they're really moving towards that headless content delivery or content as a service, and that's kind of what I touched on before with that data layer, enabling you to kind of pull the content and disseminate it across different channels, but having a single source of truth for all your content repositories. So it enables more targeted content delivery. Cool. So I'm going to move on to a little bit of information about using Content Hub. So I'm going to go through a series of different things, but I mentioned there's 5 different tools, and I'll kind of touch on some of these as we go through. But by and large, Content Hub is highly configurable. So not only is it a really powerful tool because you can bring in all of your content into a single place, it's highly configurable so that you can do things, small things like change the look and feel of it in terms of using your own branded colorways and logos and that kind of thing. But when it becomes really powerful is how you can customize like taxonomies and so on and so forth, and apply governance. You can apply usage rights, permissions, and so on. So you can really like lock down your content or open it up as you need to. And that kind of enables you to mitigate against the risk of accessing the right content at the right times. And the other thing is, which I think is quite important, is by moving your content away from Sitecore specifically and bringing it into Content Hub, where you've got all of those levels and permissions, actually you're reducing your risk with regards to who's using your CMS and who needs that training on the CMS as well. So for example, if you have a third-party PR agency that go into your website to create blogs, rather than having to do it directly into Sitecore, now it can be done directly in Content Hub and disseminated into Sitecore from there. So you're kind of reducing that risk as well. There are loads of other tools as well for things like automatic content tagging, importing assets. So if we think about configuring Sitecore Content Hub at the beginning, of course, there's loads of configuration around those policies or governance and taxonomies and so on and so forth. But actually one of the other things is bringing all of your imagery into Content Hub, and there are various different ways. You can, as a marketeer, you can do it using Excel, and then of course you can kind of do it a bit more seamlessly with development support as well. Other configurations that might be useful as a marketeer are things like configuring and enabling notifications. So for example, if somebody, your PR agency has written a piece of content or a blog or a press release or a news article, you can set up notifications to say once they've submitted it, that it emails your team so they can go directly into Content Hub and review it, approve it, and so on and so forth. So there's loads of like features in Content Hub that enable you to deliver that using things like triggers, actions, and scripts. From a connection perspective, there are loads of different ways in which you can integrate Sitecore Content Hub kind of to enable marketing teams to share content with stakeholders or pull data in and share the imagery. And these connections are kind of evolving over time. There's loads of really good learning documentations around all the integration points that are available. I'm going to talk about, on this slide, I'm just mentioning the connections with things like Sitecore itself or Salesforce and so on. So we can, in terms of that kind of creating content, and then later on I'll just mention a few where you can disseminate content to. One of the integrations is a tight integration with Adobe Creative Cloud, which means that you can, it allows designers, third-party designers, for example, to draw assets directly from Content Hub and draw them directly into InDesign, Photoshop or Illustrator. And then once they've created their imagery, edited it as they need to, they can package it back up and pop it back into Content Hub as well once finalized. And of course, those triggers I mentioned before can be automated so that the marketing team can be updated with that as well. There are integrations with Sitecore DAM and Sitecore XM, so you can integrate directly with Sitecore and draw in images and other pieces of content within Sitecore directly from Content Hub as well, and that is done using the Sitecore Connect. Sitecore Connect is also utilised for Salesforce and Marketing Cloud. Didn't think I had it on there as well. So actually what you can do is integrate directly with all of that marketing functionality, emails and so on, with Salesforce for Marketing Cloud as well. So let's assume you actually have Sitecore and Salesforce for the marketing rather than using EXM and marketing automation. You can draw the assets from Sitecore Content Hub for that too. So it's really flexible. There's loads of integrations and it's ever evolving. There are other connectors for other websites as well where you can disseminate content, and I'll mention that later on, but things like pushing your content out to other different types of third-party websites and so on. So a content planning perspective, some of the features and functionalities allow teams to work highly collaboratively. The planning functionality in Content Hub enables teams to plan an overarching content strategy and also identify the content creation needs. So mapping it out in kind of a standard marketing plan allows you to kind of identify the different types of content needs that you'll need across channels, the different need states according to the campaigns, when that content needs to be created, who it needs to be created by. You can apply all of that. It can be kind of set up by subject, persona, campaign, or in any way that the organization might need. So basically it enables teams to kind of plot their content production dates, publication timelines, the types of channels, all on a calendar, so you can clearly see the content requirements. And obviously everybody can access this within your team, so it's highly collaborative. I suppose much in the same way that Jira might be, to review status. Writing content, not only writing but ideating. Sitecore Content Hub lets you ideate and create text-based content directly within the platform, allowing you to review and approve before publication. So if we go back to my example with regards to third parties accessing the content or creating content, such as your PR agencies, they can do that directly in Sitecore Content Hub, drawing on all the assets that you've got within the DAM and writing the content there and then. Because of the way it is set up, and again this is highly configurable in terms of how you want to set this up, but from a workflow perspective and a notification perspective, teams can then come in, review, make edits, approve the content, all with it directly within Sitecore, and it can be disseminated thereafter as you need to. Which brings me on to collaboration. So you can collaborate directly within the tool itself. You can share files, manage versions, preview content, check files in and out. You can edit content in real time, add comments and annotations. You can proof and review content. You can manage those workflows of content from start to finish using Gantt style planning tools, setting tasks, resources and budgets. You can also utilize a backlog or Kanban tools to identify current statuses. When it comes to managing the actual content item itself or the piece of content, there are a number of things that are really useful here, specifically around content versions. So you can create and manage multiple different versions of content, and you can manage the usage rights of content as well. So Sitecore Content Hub acts as your brand's single source of truth when it comes to content, which means with version management and rights management included, you can look at any piece of content and plan around it and see the original source file and so on. And it means that you can identify the rights, stop usage rights and so on directly within the platform. So you've got real control and governance around the type of content that's accessible, how long it's available for, when it's relevant and so on. You can kind of set all of that within there as well. From a search perspective, often with companies that have multiple pieces of content, and I touched on this at the beginning, if there's a huge amount of content and it's being created and managed by lots of different users, there might be multiple versions, similar versions, loads of content that potentially is not being utilized. The search functionality enables you to kind of surface that content again. And it makes it quick and simple to kind of search. You can add metadata to each file and piece of content to make it available for quick discovery. There's a faceted search, so you can kind of specify how you want to be able to identify your content. There's automatic tagging of content, and the AI and machine learning technologies kind of allow searches for lookalike content to enable teams to repurpose similar or lost content items, for example, so it can quickly review that whole dam of content and surface relevant pieces of imagery, videos, and so on. And obviously you can store all different types of content within Content Hub, so it makes it really quick and easy to use. And finally, I've just realized this is really quick Hutton hosts. As I mentioned, there's loads of ways in which you'd want to disseminate your content, and again over time these integration points are evolving. Some examples include things like Twitter, YouTube integrations, SMS, multiple other marketing channels, including integrations with different websites, which means you can actually share your content across various different channels, third parties, whilst maintaining that single source of truth, that governance around your content, that consistency of brand and messaging. You can push your product content out to things like Instagram in that imagery, as you can see there, and you can kind of disseminate that all as part of your marketing plan as you kind of planned it previously. And that is it, the Content Hub in 19 minutes. Any questions? Sorry if I went through that really quickly.
I've got one. So at the beginning you showed, I don't know if it was the Experience Edge slide, but it was like the AR and VR technologies. How does that work, and is anyone doing anything with that?
I'm not entirely sure if anybody's doing it right now, but essentially the whole point is around being able to disseminate the same piece of content in a headless fashion to multiple different channels. So whether or not it's being used as VR or within wearables, but obviously if you can kind of, in Content Hub, you can set the size, type, format of your content pieces, whether that's videos or imagery, so that it can be utilized across those different types of devices.
I mean, the Content Hub really is like you say, it's a place to put media of any sort, which
Yeah.
fed into any sort of thing. And what Content Hub does is, okay, so you had an image, that's fine, but then there's all these other parameters that you can hold against it, and that's then you know, be it text or description or taxonomy or whatever you want to do. And then they've kind of evolved that now to then, well, what if we put price, and what if we put weight and things like that? So then it becomes a product rather than just the media itself. So it's kind of, that's how that's sort of evolved into being a product thing. I wondered if I'm really pleased everybody's on this call, actually, because their Content Hub's been around for a long time, yet we're all now starting to sort of pay attention to it and everything else, because it's been around a while, and we all kind of do need to. And I thought I sent an email around to the SMT last night, but I think there's one slide that would be worth sharing with you all while you're on here, because it sort of puts this in some sort of context about with what Sitecore's doing. And we are a Sitecore agency, as you all know. So I will, and this is the thing. So everything we talked about there with the Content Hub, and Natalie, you know, like all of us, is used to referring to something as Sitecore. Well, Sitecore isn't a thing now; it's a brand. What she was often referring to is really XP and XM. So Sitecore isn't what we think it is anymore. We work with Sitecore and XP and Sitecore XM a lot. And XM is something that we barely ever work with, because for those that don't know, XM is basically XP with all the marketing stuff taken out, just web CMS.
Which is really what we work with.
Yeah, which is generally what most people only use. And in America particularly, a lot of people just bought the XM flavor of it, not the full XP version, because they didn't need all the personalization stuff. They were going to do that with something else. But of course, that's not the way we do things here. So, can you enable sharing, one of you, Natalie or Andy, for me? So what's happening now with the acquisitions of BoxEver and 451, sorry, someone going to enable me. Let me hit pause, I didn't mean to do that. Right, share, where's it gone? Share. Okay, yeah, this slide here. So yesterday on a call with PAC, they shared now how they feel their product sits. So XP is over here. So that's still got things like analytics and content and decisioning and personalization and email automation, but also then BoxEver ticks a few of those boxes as well. And then over here, you've got XM, which is just the only bit that's really is web CMS. But as a content repository, you've also then got CH content, a sort of Content Hub over here. And in between, if you just want a headless CMS, you don't have to use the web CMS XM. You could use the content, the Content Hub or Experience Edge, I think, as they're calling it now. And what they're going to do in a few weeks' time is launch a bundle where you buy Content Hub and BoxEver as a bundle, as effectively content in the back end, handled by Content Hub, BoxEver doing all the personalization on the front. They've just done away with Sitecore, as we would call it, XP and XM, as a solution. Now, that sounds like we've just sort of, you know, so for us to be a Sitecore specialist, we might not touch it. You know, there'll be projects in the future where we're not doing anything with XM or XP at all. What there will be, though, as you might notice, though, as you understand really what headless means, is actually none of these things, Content Hub or Experience Edge, deliver a website or a mobile app. That's all bespoke build. So there's still shitloads of engineering. One could argue there's even more engineering now, because at least with XP, you've got some sort of front end and interface out of the box. So yeah, with these acquisitions and where Sitecore's going, Content Hub is actually a really important part of it, because it's the bit that underpins where the content comes from for any of these solutions in here. So I thought that would be worth sharing with you. I didn't mean to blow your mind either.
I've got a general question. It might not be totally related. What's the equivalent competitors of Content Hub? So like if ever you have a client coming to you like saying, I don't know if AEM is the equivalent, but if someone goes, have you got this type of tool? Then you know that Content Hub is, yeah, Content Hub does that. So
there's two ways of looking at that. So Content Hub is a pure DAM. There's thousands of those. Third Light's one that we've used on a project, including Racer Champions. and there's lots of them out there, and they're all quite expensive actually for what they do. Then you've got the other way of looking at it, where if it's going to be the backbone for something headless, then it competes head on with things like Contentful. So it's trying to take the heavy lifting, I suppose, and deal with the content crisis, as Natalie puts it, and both DAMs and headless CMSs are attempting to do the same thing, and that's what Content Hub is, a bit of both.
I've got a question. I think for Natalie, or into yourself, Paul.
Sorry, I'm not meant to be gate crashing.
Yeah, no, it's fine.
It's fine. You probably answer the questions better than me.
Well, it may or may not be a daft question, but it's kind of one thing that I want to get straight in my mind is what's the prerequisites for somebody to actually start using Content Hub? So, for example, if we've got a client who's got XP in place and are on their own, their own serving, their own servers, their own hosting arrangements, do they need to be on managed cloud, or can this be something that's plugged into their existing environment? They need to change a big. What I don't know. There's a question there somewhere. How is this built?
Yeah, I was waiting for Peter or Ginto or someone like that to drop in. I mean, the reality is no. I mean, if you're just pulling content out of Content Hub to embed in your Sitecore site, because really the Content Hub's not giving you any pages or any content. It's just a place where the content sits, the images, if you like. So that's just a sort of connection string, or actually it's more of a kind of there is a connector from Sitecore to Content Hub. So then instead of picking images from your normal library, you can pick them out of the Content Hub library. And that's the same as connecting to any third-party DAM, which you can do in Sitecore. So that's one scenario. And why would you do that? Well, clients who are already on Sitecore, you might argue, they've got so many images and so much media in their media library, it's becoming unmanageable. And obviously, Content Hub is a tool that's meant for the job and much better for it. It might be that content is more product focused, so you might then start leveraging that product, sort of all the facets. And when you put something in the media library in Sitecore, it's very much, there's not many other things you can put alongside it, in terms of tagging it, etc. So if you needed more of that, you might find the Content Hub one sort of solves that issue for you. So yeah, they're completely independent platforms. It's sort of a bit like a database can live somewhere and a website can live in another places. It's just about connection strings. Am I right, Kingsley? You're nodding, so that hopefully I'm explaining that correctly.
Yeah, kind of. I'd say you've kind of hit it in terms of they are kind of separate, as I think Natalie said, that you could just have the Content Hub and not have the Sitecore part of it. So it's its own product in its own right. So if you want to link the two, there's that connection between them. You need to configure that in one of two ways. So
So they don't need to be on managed cloud. They don't need to be on Azure. They don't need any of that. It's just a plug-in tool that's in the toolbox that they can install.
But you could run a WordPress site with content coming out of Content Hub.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
You don't really need Sitecore at all.
Don't say that out loud, Nat. We're recording this. For God's sake.
No. Well,
Content Hub, we can still make money out of Content Hub.
Yeah, that's what Sitecore is trying to encourage us to do. Really, is actually say, okay, you've got Sitecore clients at the moment. Obviously, the XMXP thing is, its days are numbered, not necessarily because they want to abandon it, because they're saying they're not going to abandon it, because they said there will always be a need for that kind of on-premise or kind of owned real estate where it's all together. Certain brands don't insist on it, rather than it all be in a cloud, for example. But what they're saying is that we want you to get them using more of the cloud. So if you can't move them off of XM and XP, because that's a big thing to do, then the best thing you could do is, okay, well, you don't want to do, let's get you using the Box Ever personalization suite. And then at least now you're starting to sort of migrate yourself towards the cloud, and we're getting them on the sort of Sitecore subscription sort of mentality. And then hopefully then we'll get them off XM and XP sort of eventually.
Cool.
Equally, they're saying, please go and play now in other places where you didn't used to play. So whereas someone might be looking at buying the Optimizely product, the old Optimizely product, not the server piece, the sort of marketing suite, you might say, well, now you can go and play and compete against that, selling just the box ever proposition that you wouldn't have even gone into that conversation before because you only had Sitecore XP to play in your tool set.
Okay.
So it means we're still Sitecore, it's still selling content and experience exactly like we've been doing. It hasn't really changed our proposition, but they have given us a number of different ways of selling and getting into different conversations now. It also means we've got to learn a lot more stuff.
Yeah. Have we got a feel for kind of licensing and costs of Content Hub? I'm assuming it's an annualized package, much like...
I've not seen any pricing yet, to be honest, and we know what Content Hub was. That was kind of premium, just as Sitecore is. And I put the question to Monty, who's the sort of Chief Growth Officer for Sitecore yesterday, saying, like, okay, it's great when you put it on a spreadsheet, we can see how all these products sort of fill up a matrix, so we can now sell them anything. But if they're all 100 grand each, then they're not quite really competing with some of the other ones that might sit in that same bowl. And he came back. There is a Content Hub Express, which I've not heard of before. So what that is, I don't know. And there was a box ever equivalent as well. So there are some entry level versions of some of these products. They're acknowledging that, you know, to get into some conversations, not everybody wants to go all in and spend 100, 200 grand. That, you know, but so there needs to be sort of more entry level products. One of the things they started off talking about, and it's been on a couple of the calls now, is really, if we're talking to a CMO or a CIO right now, they don't want a project that's going to cost well, some do, like Saga, but, you know, even they're talking about hundreds and hundreds of, you know, that's going to be £1 million project or whatever that will be for Saga, but they want it in 6-9 months. They don't want it in 2 years' time. So that's the challenge, really, is Sitecore in its old stamping ground was a 18-month, 2-year project, big, rip everything out, start again thing, and nobody's got 2 years to wait right now. So that affects the way we sell and talk about things as well. Yeah.
Do we have any other questions, ladies and gentlemen? I'm seeing shaky heads across the board. Shaky heads across the board.
It's really cool, this stuff, guys, and it is one of the challenges. Why it was discussed at SMT for everyone else who wasn't there, is how do we embrace it? Because yes, it's good. This is good for us. It's future proofing us as Sagittarius. But there's a shitload of stuff to embrace. Just firstly, understanding which bits of it should we be trying to embrace, because is it all relevant to us and our proposition? And then there's the practicality of, okay, well, we've got to reskill. What do we, you know, we're already a load of us have put a load of effort into learning the Content Hub, and we haven't got a Content Hub project yet. So we don't want to kind of do that with all these other things and never use those skills either. So it is a challenge, but it's something we've only known about. Well, the guys at Sitecore have only known it for about 3 weeks. We've known it for about 2 weeks now. So it's interesting times, but it is something we're trying to embrace and work out best ways to do it.
Yeah, the challenge that we've got, some of what Nat shared and what you've talked about, Paul, is sort of ties into this, is organizations have used really sophisticated dams since the dawn of time, and no customer would know that. It doesn't change the experience whatsoever. So we've just got to be not cautious of it, but there are some things in that matrix that Paul showed which absolutely affect how clever the experience is that a customer gets. So box ever is very interesting, whereas actual Content Hub is logistical, operational, what an organization needs to do internally to deliver its content right, which its customer has expected via its website for the last 10 years. It will see nothing different when a piece of content arrives in its experience via Content Hub or otherwise. So we have to work out what our value is around that.
Yeah, and for me, it's all about, I suppose, what my department comes down to, which is enabling our customers to deliver the best experience for their customers. So understanding what Sitecore Content Hub does and how you can bring in your multiple teams to collaborate and actually deliver a consistent messaging across multiple channels using the same and repurposed content items. That's kind of what Content Hub is enabling. It's that collaboration between teams and ensuring a consistent message across all the different channels. And it's that the end consumer is going to recognize. If you don't do it, they might not recognize you. They might not recognize when there is consistency, but they certainly will when there isn't.
Yeah, and I think that what's important in there is the last bit that you said, Nat, which is it has to be a problem that they need to solve. If their problem isn't that they're serving the wrong content to the wrong customers, then Content Hub doesn't solve anything for them. Whereas some big brands that are very content rich, some that we talk to now, that definitely is their problem. And actually they don't even know it's their problem because they don't even know enough to know they're serving the wrong stuff to the wrong people. So yeah, we've got to sort of cherry pick. For some people, this would be an absolute godsend. We've got to work, we need to, that's the...
I mean, I like it because, you know, ultimately, I think there's more engineering in there. There's more engineering of different sorts as well. If you think about all the integrations and the different headless solutions, or rather the heads that you put on those headless solutions. So I think that's more of what we want, and diversification of that as well, which is a challenge, but it's come from an engineering point of view that's maybe more interesting rather than being just siloed into Cycle's own world. And it also means there's a lot more strategic thinking, a lot more, you know, stuff around performance and CRO and customer journeys that now you need sort of even more thinking through to make sure it all stitches together and works. So I think that's all really good for Sagittarius, this team. Exciting times, really.
To follow this, there is a blog that I've written that goes into a little bit more detail about the different 5 tools, brief introduction, that Naomi's got and will be publishing in a few weeks, I think. So
next week, hopefully.
Next week, yeah. So you can have a quick look through that. Myself and the development team will be undergoing the Cycle Content Hub training as well, and probably out of that will come more information and content around Content Hub and how we can utilize it and who it's best for, and hopefully answer some more questions further down the line.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see all the work we put into Content Hub, how we actually end up first using it in anger, because it's just as likely not to be as a dam. It's more likely to be used in some other way. We'll see.
I'm sorry I had to drop off for a couple of minutes, so I might have missed this bit. It was really interesting, but what sort of percentage increase in cost would it be for our customers to use this?
I don't really have pricing or percentages that I can quote, but we do know that the full Content Hub thing could be something like £100 a year license. So it could be seriously weighty. It could easily be undersold at about 40 or 50 grand. So it's not a 10 grand thing. No. You know, Cycle licenses, again, 50 to 100 grand is, I think 100 grand is sort of an average price. So it could double it if you looked at it like that. Yeah, it's chunky enough to not just go, oh, go on, I'll have it then.
So it's a major additional investment.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously lots of encouragement at the moment for it to be sold and bundled, you know. So I don't know what that then means to you know, a new proposition. Adam might have some numbers he can float, but I don't know.
And also it depends which tools you buy into as well. So if you just get the DAM, it'll be a different price to having that and PCM, for example. So the more you buy, obviously the more it costs, and then of course the more integrations you need development support and so on and so forth.
That's been Cycle's challenge so far. It's always been a bit all or nothing. Basically, originally all you could buy was either XP or XM. That was it, the sort of 2 levels, and that was then just sold based on traffic levels or number of servers originally. Whereas now they're finding that doesn't work for a DAM. You know, it's pointless paying 100 grand a year for a DAM, because quite frankly you could buy one for 5 grand a year that does everything that you need to do as a DAM. If that's all you need it for, it only starts to become worth 100 grand if you start using the campaign planning and all those other tools. Then it's going to return some value for you. As Ian said, it's got to be worth it, because actually that's only going to help you if you've got a problem on the back end to justify the return on investment anyway. Cool.
Any other questions, guys and gals? Shaky heads? Shaky heads. Well, in which case, well done, Nat. Great stuff. The video will be up on YouTube a little bit later today. But thank you all for coming, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Natalie.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Really interesting.
Bye.
Goodbye.